1950s, we put in drive-in windows. Then in the 70s, we did direct deposit. And then we started doing ATMs. The bank doesn't have to be open for you to get cash. Online banking, and said, you don't have to come to the bank at all. And now they don't.
Normally we have people on and we ask them to introduce themselves, but I'm going to go ahead, since I know you already, to introduce you. So I did a little research on Google because, this is granddad to me. But I Googled you and I learned some stuff, okay?
Really?
Here was the most surprising. Larry Nelson, 3-time major champion.
Yes.
You didn't tell me that.
No, I didn't.
2 PGA championships and 1 U.S. Open.
Actually, I had some bank customers that would come in after Larry Nelson's name first started appearing on the winner's sheet.
Yeah.
And they'd say, well, you did pretty well this weekend. I said, yeah, it was kind of tough out there. You're just joking. And finally he won. And they came in and said, wow, how do you do that? I said, wait, we were kidding.
Yeah.
I was. But they weren't. They really thought I was playing golf on the weekends on the Pro Tour.
Wow. But that wasn't you. That was a different Larry Nelson.
There's another Larry Nelson.
You are Larry Nelson of Mountain Home, Arkansas.
Yes.
You are a graduate of the University of Arkansas with a finance degree.
Yes, banking and finance.
Banking and finance. A graduate of the SMU Banking School in Dallas.
Southwestern Graduate School of Banking, yeah.
Where you went back for a couple of years and were an instructor as well.
Yeah.
I had some sources tell me some of this information on you.
I know who it was.
Does it start with a B?
Yes.
And end in a Rinda?
She thinks a little more highly of me than I really am.
It was a long text.
Yeah.
It was a long text. You were the chairman of the Arkansas Bankers Association for 5 years.
No.
So she does think highly of you. She was lying to me.
No. I was on the board of the Arkansas Bankers Association for about 3 years.
Okay.
I was on the Arkansas State Banking Board for 10 years.
Okay.
And was chairman 2 of those years. It rotated between the members.
I was going to say, that was a long term you served for 5 years. That was, yeah. Okay, so you have those accolades. And then she also mentioned that you were a part of the governor's task force that helped rewrite some banking laws in 1997.
Yes, that group was together about 3 years.
Okay.
And it was what had happened over the years. The banking code existed in several different places in Arkansas statutes. And we were charged with the idea of finding out where all those pieces were, bringing them together, getting rid of the obsolete parts or the duplicated parts, and making it in some kind of code where somebody could find it more easily than before. So we did that, but it was quite a chore.
Interesting. It kind of sounds like a task force. I don't know that I've ever been on a task force.
We divided it up into
sounds really cool.
Well, it was, but we kind of divided it into 3 different sections. So there were 3 groups that worked on it individually, and came back and put it all together. And it passed the legislature without a negative vote, which in Arkansas is quite a feat.
That is quite a feat.
It is.
That is quite a feat. Well, what was the most memorable thing that y'all passed? You remember?
Oh, in rewriting I don't think there was anything in it that we actually proposed new. We just put it all from where it was into a place where it was more condensed and more readily available.
And lastly, 37 years in the banking industry?
Yes, 37.
All at First Security Bank?
Yes. At first it was People's Bank. And then in 1989, First Security Bank out of Searcy acquired our bank. And we became part of them. But yeah, I was there a total of 37 years. And after the acquisition by First Security, I stayed there another 20 years.
Okay. So 1972 to 2009.
Yes.
Did you like banking?
I must have.
So you worked for the same bank for 37 years?
Yes.
No transfer portal?
No. And I parked in the same parking place.
Did you?
Yes. In fact.
From the first day?
Yes.
Wow.
It's as far away from the bank as you can get.
Yeah.
So that our customers could park closer to the bank. And if you go there today, that parking spot is still vacant.
Really?
Yes. Nobody parks
Nobody
there.
wants to. It's too far.
It is.
Well, you got your steps in and were able to serve somebody. So,
Yeah.
well, you've had a fantastic banking career. I also ran upon this. I typed your name into Google along with maybe First Security Bank.
Oh,
So I had to kind of narrow it down because the first Larry Nelson was the PGA Tour professional. But I ran upon this. It was a document from June 30th, 1991. It was the 77th annual report of the bank commissioner.
yeah.
I didn't know there was a consolidated report of this, but it looked like everybody's balance sheet of all the chartered banks in Arkansas were in this report.
Yes.
I found a PDF of it.
Did you?
I did. So your name was in there. So I went to People's Bank Trust and Co. The chairman was Rennie Rutledge.
Right.
The president and CEO was Larry Nelson.
Yeah.
The total assets, can you guess?
What year?
1991.
140 million.
161.
Oh, I missed it.
161. One of the directors was Neil Nelson. Do you
Yes.
know that guy?
I do.
Yeah. I also saw one of the directors had a really cool name, Guy King.
Guy King.
That is a great name.
He was a unique guy.
Yeah.
He was from Mountain Home.
Okay.
He had a sand and gravel and an asphalt company there. And Guy was the kind of person that if you ran into him at 6:30 in the morning, he'd already been to 2 coffee shops. And he knew everything that was going on.
Really?
Yes.
It also made me think, I was like, hey, our bank's been around for a long time. So I scrolled back up to the C's, Calhoun County Bank. Chairman at that time was Cersei Harrell Jr., and the total assets were $31 million.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, out of Hampton, Arkansas.
Yeah.
So, do you know how many banks were chartered in Arkansas at that time?
I don't know.
Oh, I was going to look up how many there are today, but 173 state chartered commercial banks.
Now, that would not count national charters.
Yes, state chartered.
Right.
So, so there's a little fun fact and kind of my intro. Did I miss anything as far as Larry Nelson's bio? 3-time major champion.
I don't think so. I
Moved here now to Northwest Arkansas, but
moved here 2.5 years ago.
mm-hmm.
We stayed in Mountain Home 13 years after we retired, and we decided that since both our children and all of our grandchildren were over here, this was a good time to go ahead and make the move and be over here where y'all are.
Yeah. Well, we've enjoyed having you close and
Been
seeing
good.
you at church and lunches and all that.
Yeah,
So,
been good.
what led you originally to banking?
I went to college and was going to major in accounting, and that's what I was doing in my junior year. I had a Cajun instructor named Modizette. He's from Louisiana, and he talked fast and he talked Cajun, and I wasn't very good in the morning. And we were doing advanced accounting, and was talking about a problem that we'd been assigned the night before, and we got finished with it. And one of the other students raised his hand and he said, "Well, Dr. Modizette, what do we do with this information?" And Modizette just looked at him like that, and he said, "Hey, you guys have been spoon-fed every detail you need in accounting from the 8th grade till now." And he said, "The reality of accounting is you're going to be sitting in an office and somebody's going to walk in with a box. And in that box, there are going to be canceled checks and invoices and all sorts of things. You're going to need to know what's in the box that you don't need, and you're not going to need to know what's not in the box that you do need." So he said, "Don't give me this stuff about what do you do with this one piece of information. You don't need it. But it's going to be your job to know what you need and what you don't need." Well, I thought about that, and I got a picture of myself sitting in a small office with no windows and all these boxes around that were somebody else's stuff. And I thought, you know what? I really like interacting with people a little bit more than what I'm imagining from an accounting standpoint. So I switched my major from accounting to banking and finance, and that's what I got my degree in. And that way, it gave me more of a chance to use the accounting background that I had, which is probably a real strength that I brought to the bank. but it also gave me a chance to interact with people and be involved with people more.
Right. Yeah, that sounds exactly like your other grandson, Isaac, who was thinking about getting into accounting and
Yeah.
did an internship. And I think the lack of interaction steered him towards something else. But you're a veteran.
Yes.
So you served and then started in, how long did you serve?
It was in 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
So was that, did that lead up to your banking career right after then?
Yes.
Okay. So 72, you jumped into banking at People's Bank.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And like I said, you stayed there for 37 years.
Yes.
What value was there in being in one place for that long? And what kind of drove that decision to kind of call that home for your career?
Probably being in the Navy and being in Fayetteville at school. I was in Vietnam, and I wrote Powers Fowler, who was president of the bank at the time, and I said, I know the bank has a policy against relatives working in the same bank, and my father was working there as well. But I said, I've seen as much of the world as I need to see, and I know that Mountain Home is the kind of place where I want to live and raise a family. So if you would send me a job application, I'd like you to consider me for a job. And Powers wrote me back and he said, you don't need an application, just show up and go to work when you get here. So that's what I did.
Yeah. I heard a rumor that Baxter County was the only county allowed to grant charters in the state of Arkansas. Is that right?
No.
That's what my source said.
Well, you're close.
Close.
At the time I started banking in 1972, the state law that governed branching said that a bank with a state charter can only branch in the county that they're located in.
Okay.
So there came with the granting of a charter, basically a requirement or an expectation that you would serve that market in that county.
Understood.
And really would try to meet the needs locally. And that's one of the things that a major change during the 37 years that I was there because, Generations Bank down in Camden would have been limited to that county at that time.
Right.
A few years later, they changed the legislation, the state law, so that you could branch in a contiguous county. In other words, if your county touched another county, you can branch into that one.
Mm-hmm.
And not long after that, it followed with statewide branching, which means you go anywhere in the state you want to. And then not long after that, interstate banking. So we can branch wherever you want to. You're in Missouri now.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't do that when I was starting out. So that has been a big change as far as bank ability to branch and relocate and expand your horizon.
Right. Whether it's a lesson from a specific time or just looking back on your career as an entirety, what was one thing that you learned from banking for maybe a young banker across from you?
A couple of things that I've learned that come to mind. One was to know your competition, but don't let them lead you down a road that's a bad path. There have been several times in the Baxter County market where there have been new competitors who would come in and want to gain some market share, and to do that, you pay up on deposits or you cut the rate on loans and try to get business. So, or during the savings and loan crisis, that basic industry was on its back.
Mm-hmm.
And they were broke and going out, but they weren't shut down yet. So they were paying outrageous rates on deposits. And I remember sitting in an officers meeting one morning, one of the ladies asked me, said, how can we compete with that? I said, we won't. We'll outlast them.
Yeah.
And we did. So if a new competitor comes to town and does some things that really aren't reasonable,
Right.
You don't feel like you have to go there and follow them because that's what they're doing is not sustainable. And what you want to do in the bank is to create an atmosphere, an organization that will be there for the long haul. And we've seen several come and go in our market during my time.
Yeah.
And we outlasted them.
That's a great lesson. It's kind of reminds me of the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah. And another thing I learned was to trust the regulators, and that it took me a long time to learn that.
Yeah.
Because bankers usually don't have a good place in their heart for the bank regulators. They come in and they look at you out of a slanted eye like you're guilty, and I'm going to find out what.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that kind of atmosphere. But I learned over the years that they have a broader look at the industry on the whole and what's going on on the industry on a whole. So if you listen to them, you'll learn some stuff that maybe you didn't know about. I remember one time, it was probably 2006 or 7. The head examiner came in and sat down in my office, and he had just gotten there. And of course, that's the first conversation is kind of how are things going in the bank. So I have to confess, show him where all the bodies are buried because they're going to find them anyway. And he said, "Are y'all making any subprime loans?" And I said, "Well, we've got a couple of borrowers that are strong enough that we could probably cut their loan rate below prime. They're good borrowers." He said, "You don't know what I'm talking about, do you?" And I said, "I guess not." And what he was talking about was in the mortgage market, the ninja loans. You don't have to prove you have a job. You don't have to prove you have income.
Yeah. What did ninja stand for?
No job, no income. NJNI.
Yeah.
You don't have to prove anything. They just loan you the money.
Right.
And that's what got the housing market in trouble in a hurry.
Right.
And then that collapsed. But I would not have been aware, I don't think, of those.
Yeah.
Until I saw it on the news. But the regulator put me in on it. I won't disclose his name so he can be protected. There's an FDIC examiner. He had been around forever, and he'd been in our bank 20 times, I bet, and we'd kind of grown up together in the industry. And he came in and said, "Well, how's the bank doing?" And I told him, and I said, I know examinations are necessary, and they're good for us. I understand that. But I said, it always seems we get the new guys who just came out of examine their school, and they come in and they do this. Yeah, I'm going to get you. You just wait. I'll find out where it is, and I'll get you. And I said, that just kind of, we don't get many of the seasoned guys like yourself.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, I'll tell you something, but I'll deny that I ever said it." I said, "What?" He said, "The reason we bring the new guys to a bank like yours, because we want them to see how it's supposed to be done."
That's right.
"Before we take them somewhere else." And I said, "Did you just pay our bank a compliment?" And he said, "Nope."
Yeah, we can't compliment. No. That is awesome. That's high praise.
It really was. And I understood what he was saying at the time.
Yeah. Well, I hope you liked some of the state bank examiners that came through your branch, because I know that one of them's our chairman.
John, yeah.
John
right.
came through.
Yeah.
A couple years ago.
Yeah.
So,
I was on the state banking board for 10 years, and so I got to know quite a few of the examining force.
Right.
And good people.
Over your career, what was the most jarring change that happened?
Oh, my.
72 to 2009.
In regulation?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was there when Reg Z was passed.
Okay.
It's called Truth in Lending.
Right.
I was there when Truth in Savings was passed.
Mm-hmm.
And those were good regulations. They made lenders or anybody extending credit disclose an interest rate that was identical across a wide range of people. I can remember in Batesville, I remember seeing an ad that was painted on the side of a building down there, an old building. It was talking about 5% car loans. Well, those were in the days of add-on interest. You didn't have calculators that could calculate these things like we have today. So the add-on interest would say if you borrow $100 at 5%, that's $5. So the total you pay back is $105. Divide that by 12, and that's your monthly payment. Well, that sounds like 5% interest. But in terms of an annual percentage rate, which would be the interest you pay on a declining balance, it works out to like 14 or 15.
Yeah.
So people thought they were getting a 5% loan. All of a sudden now they're getting a 12% loan, but they're paying the same money.
Yeah.
But it was a good law.
Yeah. Yeah.
There used to be a regulation called Reg Q that told you how much interest you could pay on certain accounts. And back in that day, a lot of people were advertising with a phrase that said, we pay the highest rate allowed by law. And they did. The Reg Q told them how much you could pay. On a savings account, it was 5%. And later they created certificates of deposit. And eventually those were deregulated. And then you could pay whatever you wanted to pay. Well, the banking industry found out real quickly we had some really dumb people in there. They really weren't able to calculate what they could pay. They felt like they had to pay what their competition paid, and they did.
Right.
And you have to maintain profitability over the long haul to be around.
Yeah.
And so those people went by the wayside.
Yeah. What was the hardest time during your banking career?
The 80s were tough. The late 70s, high inflation.
Yeah.
There was
Is it comparable to today's inflation, or
no?
Is this nothing?
No, today's is nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, today's is a concern.
Right.
But it's been at such a low level for so long, people have kind of forgotten about it.
Mm-hmm.
But we had in the late 70s, 1978, I think, is when they authorized the 6-month money market certificate of deposit. And it was tied to the auction of the 26-week Treasury bills that held on Monday, and Tuesday you got a new rate you could pay.
Mm-hmm.
And those rates went sky high. The highest I remember that we paid was 16% on a 6-month CD.
Wow.
At that time, prime lending rate was 21.5%.
For comparison, today is the highest it's been in 24 years, and it's at 8.5.
8.5, yeah.
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 Wow.
We had inflation that was double digit, 10, 12%. And I can remember at the bank, there were a couple of years that we gave cost of living raises in mid-year.
Really?
Yes. Just simply because
Mid-year.
the cost was going up so fast. Now, in retrospect,
What a good bank. What a good idea.
we had, and I got to thinking backwards on this today, during that high rate period in 1980, which was an election year,
Oh, okay.
all the people were saying, well, the politicians will have the rates down by November because it's an election year and they're not going to allow these high rates to be here and all that kind of stuff. Well, we were paying 12% on deposits at the beginning of that year. And sure enough, it went down to 6 by July 1, and it was back up to 12 in November.
Really?
Yeah, my graph just looks like that. It's a great big U.
That's interesting because I've heard that this year as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing's happened.
Probably one of the best things I learned in 37 years is try not to forget what happened before you got here, because it can happen again, and if you think it won't happen again, you're putting some stuff at risk. We have been regulated and deregulated and re-regulated. It seems that every now and then there would be some people in the industry that will go off the deep end and do stuff that's not smart, and it costs them the bank.
Right.
When that happens, the regulators look at what happened and they say, we need to fix that. So they pass more regulation. Well, the barn door's been open and it's shut now. The horses are out.
Yeah.
And the only people left in there are the people who weren't doing it wrong in the first place. But we get the regulation that puts the onus on us to fix it.
What was the biggest change either from 72 to 2009 or 72 to today as far as what banks do? how banks operate?
We didn't have checking account numbers when I went to work at the bank. We didn't have account numbers. We didn't have computers.
That's a big one.
Mm-hmm. I remember we put our savings accounts on computer first. And
What year would that have been?
That would have been 73.
Computers?
Yeah.
That's actually earlier than I
Well,
thought.
now those are not PCs.
Okay.
We had an arrangement with Worthen Bank in Little Rock. They had the computers,
You're
and
kidding.
they provided services to the correspondent banks.
Interesting.
So I mean, they had the big stuff.
Like take up a room, big stuff.
Half of it at least.
Depends on the size
But
of the room.
they had the capacity, and we would. We're 3.5 hours from Little Rock, so they would pick up our work in the afternoon, drive it to Little Rock. They'd process it at night, and drive it back up here the next morning, and we'd have it.
Wow.
So we putting things on computer was a big change as far as handling the transaction, but we still had lots of checks. And the transition from us handling checks to some of the merchants handling checks and then just sending us the files. Walmart did that first. That cut down on our handling of paper checks, which would reduce our cost. But then everything started going electronic after that.
What year would you say that kind of started happening?
Probably the year I left.
Yeah.
Or the year before, 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
The Apple phone came out in June of 2007. So probably by 2009, it was starting to have an impact on banking. I can remember when Rennie Rutledge first got his BlackBerry, and one of the other guys in the boardroom was at the other end of the table, and Rennie would just pick up his phone and text the guy at the other end of the table while we were talking about a loan application.
Yeah.
So I mean that was pretty high tech. You didn't pass notes; you just sent a text.
Yeah.
But the advent of digital transactions has had a big impact on banks. Banks have traditionally been had two roles. One is transactions, get money from one person to another person. We facilitate the payment system, and we have been tools that the Fed can use to increase or decrease the money supply, which would have an impact on credit and how much expansion the economy is doing. They still do that, but as far as the transactions, those are no longer proprietary to commercial banks.
Yep.
You've got PayPal, you've got all kinds of things out there. Discover, you've got online banks. We're not the only ones in that business anymore. So we've kind of given up part of our territory. Looking back, in 1950s, we put in drive-in windows, and we told our customers, said, you really don't have to come in the lobby anymore. And then in the 60s, we started doing direct deposit. No, it was bank by mail. So you really don't have to come in the bank anymore. You can bank by mail.
Oh.
And in the 70s, we did direct deposit.
Yeah.
You don't have to come in the bank anymore. And then we started doing ATMs. The bank doesn't have to be open for you to get cash. and then we did the online banking and said, you don't have to come to the bank at all.
Yep.
Well, we've told our customers for 70 years, you don't have to come to the bank. And now they don't.
And it's a problem.
Well, we have made
we want them here.
We've made our entire customer base susceptible to an email, junk mail, or a phone call.
Yep.
From any number of providers from coast to coast. So, doesn't sound like we're very smart.
Well, I got in 2 years ago, so don't look at me.
I know.
You spoke about there's a lot of competition out there for banking between online banks or a PayPal or whatever it might be. So why is community banking still important?
I think that there'll always be a place for a community bank. There may be some of the business that gets stolen away or wooed away, but I think people really want to know that there are people that are interested in what's going on in the community and supporting it, that they're interested in what's going on with them or their family, and can give them advice as far as financial matters go. And sometimes that advice is not what they want to hear. But if it's sound and it's given in the right spirit, then it's okay. But I think that the community bank and the community banker is one that will always have a place. There are people who won't be courted away by 0.1% more or less on a loan or a deposit account. They'll stay. But I think that it's imperative that that community banks continue to do the things that people want to do. Part of our mission statement at our bank was that our job was to operate as a sound commercial bank, delivering, developing, and servicing those products and services that satisfy the needs of customers, staff, and shareholders. So if we remember that's what we're supposed to do, then there'll be a place for us. As long as we're satisfying the true needs of the customer, we'll be okay. And I don't think that's something on the other end of a computer line understands.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite memory or want to speak at all to what you enjoyed about it?
Oh, I enjoyed the people.
Yeah.
The staff. I miss the staff.
Yeah.
A lot of them that were there when I retired have also retired. So my team is pretty much gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I've developed some close friendships with a lot of those folks, and we've been through some difficult times, some hard economic times together, and but we made it.
Yeah.
And you look back with a lot of satisfaction on that. And I miss the customers. You develop some relationships with people that you're not going to find anywhere else. Your finances are a really personal thing. You don't talk about that with just everybody. And if your loan officer wants you to explain the financial statement to him, and you do that, then you just created a bond that's different than any other thing.
Yeah.
He's just opened up his finances to you.
Yeah.
And that's a very personal thing. In Mountain Home, we had a lot of people who retired, and they didn't need to borrow money, but they were good depositors, and were in the bank a lot. Their particular generation was that generation that wanted to go into the bank lobby. They wanted to see the loan officer. They wanted to see the bank president wave at them. I mean, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Not so much so your generation. You could care less. But I mean,
not me.
It's a generational thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have, like I say, we've taught our customers you don't have to come to the bank, so they don't.
Yeah.
And as a result, they wouldn't know us if we ran into them at Walmart.
Yeah, that's true. What's your not sales pitch, but why should people get into banking?
If you're a pending graduate of high school or college, and you're considering banking as a career, it's a good career. It's rewarding in lots of ways that you can't find anywhere else. You make friends, you build relationships with customers. You can watch your customers' business develop and grow, and you can feel like you're a part of that. And I'm not sure that that's something you can find anywhere else. The industry is changing. It is high tech as far as systems that are used to deliver, and it will continue to be on the leading edge, I think, of whatever's going on in technology. Those who don't do that will get left behind, but I think banking has proven, as this whole thing has transitioned into more technical and technological equipment, that we can go where it's going, and we'll succeed there. So I think the future is good in banking, and if I were 23, I would probably do it again.
Would you? That's good to hear. I'm not 23. I'm close, but it's encouraging. I'm really enjoying it. So
yeah, I was 23 when I went in.
Really?
Yeah.
I think I was too, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked you that because I think there is not necessarily a crisis, but it's not necessarily what the most desirable job right now. And so I think it's important to keep advertising, keep encouraging folks to jump in. But you did well behind the microphone. I know you're not Nana,
No.
who spent 40.
Would you
how many years was she behind the microphone
34.
on the radio?
34.
34 years.
Would you like a weather forecast?
I'm looking outside, yeah.
She used to do probably 24 of those a day.
Really?
Yeah. So when she
Weather forecast?
Yeah.
Oh.
So when she came home, retired, I still get about 12 a day from her. She can't give it up.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, did she ever interview you?
Yeah. She did.
So there's a standard out there on how well a Larry Nelson interview goes.
Well, I was interviewed 3 or 4 different times for different things.
Yeah.
Once when I was on the state bank board. Once when I was helping as an instructor for smoking cessation.
Okay.
Once as a worker for the Rotary Pancake Day. And then I think once, maybe for the bank when we were doing something.
I appreciate you stopping by and reminiscing on what you learned. All of your experience is super valuable to me.
Cool.
And will be to all of our listeners. So
I hope so.
I think it will be. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll keep doing lunches so I can keep learning.
Good.
All right. Thanks
for having me.